From WNEP, the news station, this is 2024, a look back.
Hello, I'm Melissa Steininger. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been 15 years since two Luzerne County judges were accused of taking kickbacks in exchange for the clearing of the way for a privately run juvenile detention center. That scandal became known as Kids for Cash. Now, over the course of the year, I've been working to uncover the effects of Kids for Cash that it still has today as a different crisis is unfolding, a shortage of juvenile detention beds. Law enforcement says they have nowhere to put Luzerne County's most violent young offenders, and they're scrambling to fix what's being called a broken juvenile justice system. The cloud of what's become known as the Kids for Cash scandal still hangs over Luzerne County 15 years later.
Because I didn't understand how I could be guilty of a kickback.
It's believed to be our country's biggest judicial corruption scandal, but in its wake, another crisis is unfolding within Luzerne County's juvenile justice system.
They know the system and they know how it works, and they know right now, over the last few years, you could pretty much do whatever you want and nothing's really going to happen to you.
Effects of Kids for Cash can be found in every corner of Luzerne County, and because of it, lives have been changed forever.
It's not fair. It's not right. He didn't deserve that. No kid deserves that.
Inside her home in Plymouth, Sarah Chicalo now clings to the memories of what her life looked like before May of last year.
An hour later, a kid ran through my house and said, Owen was shot. And then I didn't know. I just dropped everything and just ran out the door.
Sarah says her son, Owen, was shot in the head at an apartment with friends on South Franklin Street in Plymouth. Owen was just 14 years old at the time. Sarah says he was found alone when the ambulance arrived. I mean, they should have
been there for him. He wouldn't have left them.
So far, no charges have been filed in Owen's case. The Luzerne County District Attorney tells us the suspected shooter should have been in juvenile detention for previous crimes at the time of the shooting, but there were no facilities available.
Put them in the adults. They want to act like adults, then treat them like one.
And while Owen's recovery has been a miraculous one, his story isn't unique. Law enforcement, school districts, and Luzerne County officials are all working to combat violence among teens in incredible numbers. Kingston Police Chief Richard Kochik says his department made 144 arrests at the Wyoming Valley West Middle School during the 2021-2022 school year alone. That's nearly one arrest each day.
I took it personal. As I watched what was going on in these schools. I went to these schools, and our calls for service were unbelievable.
These agencies all believe it stems from one issue, a lack of detention beds.
There is no punishment for them. We don't see anything that's being done.
So how exactly did we get here? People working on all levels of Pennsylvania's juvenile justice system believe this current crisis started with reforms and changes that stemmed from the Kids for Cash scandal.
I was always there for those kids, and I resent the fact that people think I did something improper.
That's former Luzerne County Judge Mark Chivarella back in 2009. He and Luzerne County's former president judge Michael Conahan were accused of shutting down the county-run juvenile detention center and accepting millions in kickbacks from the builder and co-owner of two for-profit detention centers, one of them near Pittston.
That I will impose the maximum sentence allowed by law.
Chivarella presided over juvenile court and pushed a zero-tolerance policy that often guaranteed harsh sentences and included placement at those facilities for minor offenses. Judge Michael Vogue has served Luzerne County for the past 12 years as president judge, the role previously held by Conahan.
Like nothing would happen here would ever happen again because of the safeguards that were put in place by the legislature after what happened here.
After the Kids for Cash scandal, there's been an overhaul of the juvenile justice system in Pennsylvania. Kids must now be represented by a lawyer throughout their entire process in juvenile court. All of the kids who appeared before Chivarella between 2003 and 2008 had their records expunged. Nearly 2,500 of them.
No, you know what he told everybody in court? They need to be held accountable. me. Do you remember me?
But since then, the Council of Chief Juvenile Probation Officers reports there's been a 74% decline in the number of kids getting sent to detention facilities. That stark drop prompted the closure of a dozen private and county-run detention centers across the state.
The pendulum has swung so far to the other side that now it's to the point where there are no consequences for actions.
Those closures have created a shortage of youth detention beds. These spaces serve as a safe place for a child to stay while their case is being handled in court, or for those who commit a crime serious enough to be removed from the community.
Frustration with the lack of beds is not because we want to place more children. The frustration with the lack of beds is that when we do have that rare instance where placement is necessary, we can't right now.
According to the Pennsylvania Juvenile Court Judges Commission, Pennsylvania currently has 513 detention center beds licensed by the State Department of Human Services. But there are not enough workers, and only 366 of those beds are actually operational.
If we don't correct this, we're going to see those 50% reduction in allegations. It's going to start skyrocketing.
About half of those operational beds were designated by the courts for kids from Philadelphia, and 7 counties operate their own beds, leaving just 15 secure detention beds available to serve 60 counties across Pennsylvania. And there's not a single detention bed in all of Northeast PA.
All these counties are competing for the same beds, but the beds aren't in our area. So you're competing, in that Philadelphia region, Western PA, and so on. So even Ohio, kids are being sent to.
Without a single one available in or near Luzerne County, Probation Director Kevin Perluke says the county has nowhere to house their most violent offenders. Kids arrested for gun crimes, aggravated assault, robberies, or even fighting in schools.
We're not looking to detain every kid that comes on juvenile probation, but there is a small amount that need to be detained. Unfortunately, they're back in the schools. They're on our caseload, causing stress to our probation officers who all know that these kids should be placed somewhere, and they're back in the community.
Police and Luzerne County probation officers often drive hours and even states away to find a bed. And if they do find one, the facility has the right to reject a child.
We're not doing anything with them. There's nowhere to go with them. And when they do find a placement, or they do have a placement, outside of cost, I could say that manpower-wise for us, it's a burden, an enormous burden.
The Pennsylvania Juvenile Court Judges Commission estimates that 12 counties throughout northeastern Pennsylvania would need anywhere from about 35 to 43 detention beds. But without a single one,
we're coming back and rearresting the same juveniles 2, 3, 4 times.
It's a safety crisis because what we need to do now is, because we can't place them, we put them on ankle monitors with electronic monitoring to see where they are. But we've had children cut the monitors off, we've had children run, we've had children offend.
And oftentimes, these young offenders end up back on the streets and even in school hallways.
And they can be back in your classroom on Monday with or without an ankle bracelet, or you not even knowing it. That's a problem.
We're failing them. We're failing the kids, the good kids, the kids that want to be there, the kids that want to learn, that are afraid to go to the bathroom, that are afraid to walk the halls because of violence.
Failing a community and failing our kids, something Sarah Chicolo also feels as this mom from Plymouth continues to wait for answers.
Better build another building, put these kids in. They're like running around like animals. Like, look at my son now.
School districts in Luzerne County and surrounding areas are left to deal with the repercussions of the scandal. Still ahead, the problems around the Keystone State and what officials are doing to combat it. The Kids for Cash scandal continues to impact communities and schools across the Commonwealth. School districts across Luzerne County are seeing a major problem with violence among students inside the school walls and outside because of the lack of juvenile detention beds. Many of them are back in class the next day. Public school officials say the situation only adds to staffing shortages and leads to safety concerns in the classroom. It's also prompting more parents to send their kids to private school.
Coaches, number
Friday Night Lights, a tradition throughout Pennsylvania. One that's been celebrated for generations at schools throughout Luzerne County. But now that tradition is being tested. It was this chaos caught on camera outside the Wyoming Valley West Stadium back in 2021 that led Kingston Police Chief Richard Kochik to suggest a change.
The problems that we started having, the violence that we started having, I said, we're done. Cops were assaulted. There was numerous acts of violence that changed the way we do that.
While the Friday Night Lights are staying on at Wyoming Valley West School District, football fans must now pass through metal detectors as they file into the stadium in Kingston.
10, 12 cops. You can't come to a game without your parents.
Similar violence has infiltrated the hallways and cafeterias of schools throughout Luzerne County. Chief Kochik says there were 144 arrests at the Wyoming Valley West Middle School in the 2021-2022 school year. That's nearly one arrest each school day. And the problem isn't just on Luzerne County's west side. According to Pennsylvania's 2022-2023 school safety report, the Greater Nanticoke Area School District has one of the highest numbers of violent incidents per student in the county.
We're talking about weapons. We're talking about assault. We're talking about those types of crimes that are really problematic, and schools are not equipped to deal with that.
That violence has trickled into the city of Nanticoke as well.
It's permeated this town over the course of the last 5-6 years.
That uptick in issues all stems from the lack of juvenile detention beds across northeastern Pennsylvania. Right now, there's not a single bed in Luzerne County to hold the most violent youth offenders.
Let's say a teacher was hit, that kid could be there the next day at school.
Superintendent Ronald Gravira has worked as an educator for 28 years, and he spent the past decade at GNA.
When I first started here 10 years ago, we didn't have cameras, we didn't have security, we didn't have metal detectors. Now, that's a part of the principal's daily routine.
And it changes the way classrooms now look as well.
For the first time in 28 years, we have teacher shortages. People don't want to go into education any longer because they don't want to deal with the behaviors of certain kids and the way that they're acting in classrooms.
The Pennsylvania Department of Education reports there are currently about 5,500 teacher vacancies across the state.
10 years ago, Pennsylvania certified nearly 20,000 new teachers every year. Last year, we certified only 5,000.
Ethan Hulick is one of those teachers who left his dream behind. He taught at Hanover Area Junior-Senior High School until June of 2022.
At that point, I have to think, do I want to do this for another 27 years? At what cost?
Hulick isn't the only one who left Hanover Area during that time. According to Superintendent Nathan Barrett, he lost 10% of his district faculty that very same year.
We have folks that don't maximize their benefit, their retirement benefit, because they want out.
Hulick first walked the halls of Hanover Area as a student, graduating back in 2013. But those same hallways looked much different when he returned to his alma mater just 6 years later.
So the one kid picks up the kid, body slams him. I run over and just scoop him up. And I go, stop, stop. And then he goes, he's touching me, he's touching me. So I dropped him and I said, beat each other up, and I walked away.
Hulick started teaching 8th grade English in February of 2020, just weeks before the COVID-19 pandemic closed our schools. But when they reopened,
disciplines got taken away that should have been there and should have always been there for our protection as teachers.
I don't have my teachers teaching to the best of their ability because they're trying to figure out, are they okay? Are they safe?
Hulick says he saw violence in his classroom, and the hallways were even worse.
The kid punched over her, and one hit knocked the kid, and he went back, cracked his head off of the tile. Blood started gushing out, and he started to seize.
There's a staff who gives me everything they have in the course of a day, and I had to be the one to deflate them, that I have no remedy for what they just had experienced.
That's when Hanover area began to create changes. A police officer in every building and a no-tolerance cell phone policy.
We found that there was a tremendous appeal to record violence and post it all over social media sites. We have seen a drastic decline in violence because there wasn't the reward that was there before.
Hanover area, alongside Wilkes-Barre area, Wyoming Valley West, and the greater Nanticoke area all top the list of violent incidents per student in Luzerne County, according to that school safety report. It's violence like this that has led to a zero-tolerance fighting policy at Wilkes-Barre area high school in Plains Township.
If you are not there for an education, if you are there to get in fights and cause trouble, we'll provide you an education, but it won't be in that building.
Patrick Peters is the principal of the newly established Cyber Academy at Wilkes-Barre area. It's the first of its kind in the state as administrators are trying to combat this growing problem.
And again, I think a lot of it has to do when you have shows like On Patrol Live, where you see these kids that are in your classroom or in the community, and all of a sudden that are involved in crimes.
The Cyber Academy is a court-mandated program through the Luzerne County Juvenile and Family Court. This program comes as judges like Jennifer Rogers say their hands are tied.
My options are deficient and or non-existent. It certainly impedes my ability to do my best job.
But this program is just a Band-Aid as the county continues to struggle to address the problem at hand.
Again, it's just another thing that's being put on us that we as a district have to try and fix on our own.
These issues within the county's public schools has led to a spike in enrollment in private schools across the county. Holy Redeemer in Wilkes-Barre is seeing an increase in public school transfers, and Good Shepherd Academy in Kingston reports that it took in more than double the amount of new students it was expecting. Meanwhile, public school districts continue to put in place measures they hope will reduce violence, even when it comes at a cost.
All the residents of the surrounding area are footing the bill for because of unhealthy circumstances that are within the walls of this building.
As districts continue to put in place any measures they can to figure out how to combat this crisis. Kingston Police now has a school resource officer in the middle school, and arrests have been cut in half.
Now I think this year I'm starting to see that difference at the middle school. High school not so much, but the middle school we are now starting to see the change.
A change of tradition, all for the safety of our students.
So we will do our job to the fullest, and we will do what we have to do to make sure that the schools are a safe place.
Meanwhile, the victims of the Kids for Cash scandal continue to feel the effects of what they went through so many years ago. Coming up next here on Newswatch 16, how the state is trying to right the wrongs of the past and what still needs to be done. Coming up. As we've been focusing on the lack of juvenile detention bed centers and how it's impacted Luzerne County, we can't forget where all of this began, the Kids for Cash scandal. Judges accused of taking kickbacks in the lives of 2,500 children changed forever.
No comment. There's a platform. They're charged with taking kickbacks.
It's the scandal that thrust Luzerne County into the spotlight.
Prosecutors say they were in cahoots to then keep the jail filled with children.
What's become known as the Kids for Cash scandal rocked the county 15 years ago.
Remember my son, an all-star wrestler? He's gone.
But more than 100 miles away, Paterson, New Jersey has one of the state's highest crime rates according to federal numbers. Despite that, this part of Passaic County has become a safe haven for Geraldine Diaz.
I literally thought that by running away from Pennsylvania and trying to block it, it would make things better. Oh no, it brought me back like as if I was in that place all over again.
Geraldine was just a young girl when she and her family moved from New York City to Hazleton, a place that felt like freedom.
I was a happy person. I was always laughing. Oh, I would laugh like crazy all the time.
That laugh silenced in an instant, and that freedom taken away as Geraldine was sentenced by Luzerne County Judge Mark Chivarella at 15 years old for jaywalking and resisting arrest. The proceeding taking just minutes before she was taken from the courtroom.
I was just saying, Mom, Please don't let them take me. I don't want to go to jail.
Geraldine spent 667 days, nearly 2 years at the PA child care facilities, including the one near Pittston. That for-profit facility in Luzerne County was at the forefront of the Kids for Cash scandal. Luzerne County Judge Mark Chivarella and former President Judge Michael Conahan were accused of shutting down the county-run juvenile detention center and accepting millions in kickbacks from the builder and co-owner of that detention center near Pittston and another in western PA.
Not here, he's dead!
As that corruption came to light, Geraldine became one of the 2,500 victims who had their cases dismissed. While her record was wiped clean, her scars still remain.
I never really left that place. I feel like I'm still in there.
Hillary Transu was the whistleblower for what's become known as one of the worst judicial corruption scandals in our country's history. One that drew the national spotlight.
A Kids for Cash scheme. Dodgy judges are getting...
Hillary was a freshman at Crestwood School District back in 2006 when she created a fake MySpace page about her vice principal.
It did become cruel at a point. Kids were allowed to leave comments on there, and because I had chosen this figure that was widely disliked, kids would have a problem with the vice principal at school, and then they would come home and vent their frustrations.
But that was a short-lived stint. Hillary said she had nearly forgotten about the fake page until
my mom called from the bottom of the stairs and she said, "Hillary, do you know anything about a MySpace page?" And my blood ran cold.
You can expect that I will impose the maximum sentence allowed by law.
And the moment when, Chivarella said, send her up to fact, and I had no idea what that meant, but his gavel came down.
Hillary had zero representation in the courtroom, much like the majority of the thousands of kids that came in front of Judge Mark Chivarella. She was sentenced to 3 months in juvenile detention and 6 months probation, but she says there were loopholes.
So if I misbehaved in any way during my time in juvie that displeased Judge Chivarella, he could just keep resentencing me until I was 21 years old. So you could be in the system forever.
Just 3 weeks into her sentence, the Juvenile Law Center stepped in. The Philadelphia-based nonprofit first heard about what was happening in Chivarella's courtroom when Hillary's mom reached out.
Our shock was really about that, about the way the kids were treated in the courtroom. We did not initially know about the financial dealings that were going on.
Those financial dealings involved upwards of $3 million. Both judges still serving sentences for racketeering conspiracy.
The kids that were affected by Chivarella, the people who were affected by him, they aren't mad because he took money. That's salt in the wound. What we're mad about is that he hurt us.
The Juvenile Law Center continued in the years after to bring changes to Pennsylvania's juvenile justice system. Now it's nearly impossible for kids to give up their right to counsel and easier to expunge juvenile records. The state has also tightened regulations for removing kids from their homes and placing them in detention centers. State lawmakers solidifying it in writing.
Based on Kids for Cash, we've really put in place those protections inside the courtroom where they were violated. The other things that we're working on are the next steps.
All of these changes have led to a drop in juvenile incarceration rates.
So our successes really are, we're becoming a victim of it in a way, in the fact that we have reduced in 10 years the secure detention admissions by 74%.
These changes have also led to the closure of a dozen county and privately run juvenile detention facilities. Those closures have created a severe shortage of juvenile detention beds across the state, leaving counties like Luzerne with nowhere to house their most violent juvenile offenders.
There are 0 beds, detention beds in our region. There's none in Luzerne County. We have children that we're detaining in other counties and sometimes even other states.
According to the Juvenile Court Judges Commission, the decrease in placement has saved Pennsylvania $172 million over the past decade. But what's been done with all that money?
It is always a mystery where the savings go. Some states have been very intentional about reinvestment. To the extent that Pennsylvania has failed to do that, we need to ask ourselves why.
The Pennsylvania Juvenile Task Force came out with 35 recommendations to help fix the flaws within the juvenile justice system. That was 2 years ago, but the state legislature has yet to pass a bill related to those recommendations. State Senator Lisa Baker from Luzerne County is a co-chair of the task force.
One of the bills that I have in the Appropriation Committee would do just that. It would redirect the resources into community-based care.
I think it's really unacceptable to say this is just the way it goes, because kids don't have the luxury of time.
So what can be done? A regional detention center may be the fix.
I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but we have some resources here in the community that's helping this. It's like putting a Band-Aid on it right now, but we still need that detention center.
But history could be holding us back.
We owe it to that child to get them out of that situation and to rehabilitate them somewhere else. Not to have a knee-jerk reaction because 10 years ago there was a judge scandal.
I didn't understand how I could be guilty of a kickback.
As the spotlight once again shines on the juvenile justice system in Luzerne County, a place where it all began 15 years ago.
I loved helping those kids. I would never do anything to hurt a child.
A place where so many still live with the scars.
Every single day I wake up having to fight to live when I really don't want to.
And a place where it continues to live on in this new crisis of Kids for Cash.
Hi, Newswatch 16. I'll be home soon.
Where the crisis stands today, coming up next on Newswatch 16. And while we took a dive into this crisis back in March, it's still an open-ended issue today. Luzerne County continues to put in place measures to help curb this problem and is working to figure out a long-term solution. Of course, with that, the county is also trying to focus on programs for rehabilitating these young offenders. Meanwhile, officials in Lycoming County are proposing a 170-bed facility, and it's expected to help that current detention bed shortage. Lycoming County District Attorney Tom Marino was a federal prosecutor during the Kids for Cash scandal. He says this proposed facility will have safeguards against any money exchanges and an authority board, as well as mental, behavioral, and educational resources for the kids. The cost, though, about $60 million. Marino hopes to break ground on the facility in Lycoming County sometime in 2026. And of course, we'll continue to follow Kids for Cash, the new crisis in the new year here on Newswatch 16. Thank you so much for joining us on this special edition on Newswatch 16. We'll be right back.